Okay. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to see while we're waiting for the audience to log on, what has been your favorite quarantine activity? Mine specifically, let's see, I have really been enjoying walking my dogs. And I live in Virginia, so it's very humid and hot. So I always have an iced tea with me, and we go on like 2-mile walks, and it's awesome. So how about you, Summer?
For me, I would say one of my favorite quarantine activities has been doing a trivia night with one of my Facebook groups. So we do trivia twice a week, and it's just been fun to get together over Zoom and just kind of learn a little bit about different history. I'm a history buff, so it's always fun to like learn little tidbits that I didn't know, and just enjoy some laughter with folks too.
That's cool. And Tiffany?
I will share in your iced tea. My husband and I have been trying different teas. He likes hot tea. I like cold tea. So now that it's hot and steamy in the summer, I've been trying out some different iced teas. I have one next to me now. And writing, coloring, those have been fun, nice, relaxing things to do. And I love to write, so it's been a great time.
Awesome. And how about you, Sarah?
I'm a big home DIY renovator, so we've taken quarantine and it's been honestly pretty extra. We built a 600 square foot deck in our backyard and have been redoing like all of the landscaping, but you know, I spend all day on a computer, so getting to spend like all day every day on my weekends outside only has been like a really good option for me during quarantine.
Definitely. And Liz, how about you?
Yeah, I've become a plant mom over quarantine. I had no plants before, and now I think I'm up to 6. I've been propagating lettuce by just like popping it in a little bin of soil, and it started sprouting up, and I got so excited. And this is all just like on an apartment patio as well. It's not like I really have a yard, so I've been enjoying getting creative with that.
That's very cool. So I guess too, if anyone that's watching, if you had a cool quarantine activity, you can put it in the chat. And Liz, did you want to take over?
Yeah, absolutely. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm so excited for this panel on allies, mentors, and sponsors. We have an amazing cast of women who are going to share their experiences and their perspectives. If this is your first Breaking the Glass event, love to give you a little bit of background about our program. We were created out of the concern of gender equity by the leadership at Computer Futures. Computer Futures is a contract technical recruitment company. So we place people in Salesforce, mobile, BI, Adobe, and various software development languages. So if you're interested in getting in touch about that, I'm happy to get you connected with the right people. But the Breaking the Glass journey started about 5 years ago. When the leadership knew that they wanted to do something more beyond making sure that their recruiters were checking their unconscious biases, that they were submitting diverse candidates. Additionally, like pushing back on hiring managers when appropriate, saying, you know, hey, like, let's review that feedback, you know, let's, you know, really dig into the root of it to see if, you know, they are not just because they're not a culture fit, let's see if they're a culture add. So they started creating one-off meetup events to have these conversations. And yeah, it just really started to grow in the Austin community. 2020 was our official Go national date. So we're looking to build communities in New York, DC, and San Francisco. But right now, since the pandemic started, we have enjoyed meeting virtually and having panelists from across the country and attendees. And so it's been really just an amazing time. So again, thank you all for joining. I'm going to be sending some links for resources in the chat, and then I'm going to turn off my box and let the panelists get started because y'all came here for them.
That sounds good. Thanks, Liz. I am Melanie Bikowski. I'm from Zeneth Technologies Partners. I'm a human resource analyst, and we are sponsoring this event. I will be moderating and doing the questions. So I guess for this first question that we start with, I will ask the question, and then if you can introduce yourself and then maybe answer the question, if that sounds good for everyone. Okay, So to get into the questions, before defining the role of allies, mentors, and sponsors, which is the topic of this panel, what is the intention behind having these resources? Tiffany, can we start with you?
Sure. So I'm Tiffany Castagno, and I am CEO of SHRM. So thanks for having me. Great to be here today. And my organization is an HR consulting firm. So we help small, medium businesses, nonprofits, startups with their policies, systems, procedures, and infrastructures. Love what I do. So to answer your question, I think it's very important to, the word intentional, I believe, was in the question for a reason. And it's one of those things when you're networking, you want to be very intentional. It's making sure you are best set up for success and knowing what you want in your career so that you're able to really find an ally, a mentor, or a sponsor to help you along the way.
Very cool. And let's go ahead and define what an ally, mentor, and sponsor is. Sarah or Summer, did you want to take the lead on this?
Yeah, I can add into that. So I'm Summer McAfee. I have been in corporate America my whole career. I've been with USAA for 20 years. We are a financial services company that caters to the military community. And I'm passionate about community service and community outreach. And so that's really where I spend my off time, is out in the community, just doing different activities and volunteering. And when I think about those three, as far as sponsorships, allies, and mentors, the three roles are very different. While they're very needed, I would say, especially depending on what chapter you are in your career, or phase you are in. But what I will say is, for a sponsor, I really think about defining that as the person who really has a seat at the table, right? So a sponsor is different than a mentor, because a sponsor really is looking to help you with getting to your next level or your next goal in your career. Whereas a mentor is where somebody I really feel I can say the good, bad, and ugly. Like, I feel like as a mentor, they're investing in me to help me grow. And they don't necessarily always have to have a seat at the table, right? So they don't have to necessarily be someone that's going to be in the rooms where decisions are being made, or a key, new roles or new things are happening, but they're really invested in helping me grow. And they also have the time. I think that's a big thing with mentorship, is you also want to find someone who has the time. So I think that's a good point as well.
Definitely.
And then allyship is different, because allyship is someone who is really more of an advocate. A lot of times they may not be in your same demographics or same culture or same religion, same background that you were in, but they're really looking to come alongside you and help your voice have even more power. So it's almost like saying, like, hey, let me share that ticket with you because I want to help you with the things that you're looking to do.
Definitely.
Summer, I really agree with the way that you defined all three of those roles. And by the way, my name is Sarah Kettles. I'm a Senior Director of Research at The Zebra. The Zebra is an auto and home insurance comparison company. And what my team does is to help lead the product and design teams by making better decisions, more consumer-focused decisions. And we provide consumer research and insights to help guide those decisions. And like I mentioned, Summer, I completely agree with the way that you defined those three roles. And for me, I see them all three as necessary at certain parts of our careers, but it's also a give and take relationship, right? There's times when I need an ally, I need a mentor, or I need a sponsor, but there's also times when I can be that person for somebody else. And I think that's another really important aspect of all three relationships, knowing when you can be that for somebody else and stepping in there, but also knowing when to make the ask of someone when you need it for yourself.
Definitely, and I think the current events as well at this time is really trying to touch on these different roles that are available in our, these different roles that we're trying to define for our audience. How would you say, do you have anything that you would like to talk about for the current events? I know that for me specifically, the question I would have are, what are some moments of celebrations with allyship? Like, could we please share some successful examples of allyship that any of you have witnessed?
I have one that I can share. It doesn't specifically talk to what's happening right now when I think of like the Black Lives Matter movement or the racial injustices that are happening. But one celebration story, and this happened prior to this, that I can think of is really having an ally who actually was proactive in helping me with looking for my next career move. So this is an individual who actually sent me jobs when she saw job postings on the job board. And I think when you pause and think about that for a moment, there's not too many people who actually take the time to really just look out for you, right? I mean, she could be on the job board looking for her own next career move, but I think just to take a quick minute and be like, here's a couple somewhere that I think that might align to what you're looking to do next. I feel like that's really key. And then also just being someone when she's in a room that I'm not in, she's somebody who also will look out for, hey, is this a good opportunity that Summer could also serve on this committee? Or is this a good opportunity that we, you know, do we have a diverse group on this committee, just period, right? Sometimes like a couple of people together and do something really amazing, but then it's like, as they get to roll it out across the enterprise or at a larger scale, you know, do we have representation from across the employee population? And so just having someone that looks out for me like that, I definitely feel that that's how her allyship and our friendship has blossomed, just by her being someone who's, I feel like, just looking out for me.
I have an example that's, I guess, tangentially related to what I think we're all experiencing with coronavirus right now. Last year, the Zebra redid our parental leave policy, and the SHRM, which is our employee resource group for women, was one of the sort of driving efforts to get that policy updated so that it was more inclusive for parents coming from all types of situations, but also that it offered benefits that were commensurate with what mothers and birth mothers need in particular, which is, you know, more than 8-12 weeks off of work. And we did a bunch of research to prep for that conversation and to pitch that to our leadership. But ultimately, in the end, we decided to pull in a few of our male VPs. We asked them to come to a few prep sessions, and we said, hey, you're going to help us present and pitch this. We really need your allyship in the room there. Here are some slides we think you'd be great to present. Come practice with us. And I still to this day think that having them in the room, having them help advocate for the parts of the slide deck that we chose for them was one of the reasons why getting it pushed through was so easy with our leadership team. And I was really grateful for their allyship, but also really impressed with the ability for our ERG leaders to identify that as a real opportunity for us to get something through quickly. And why I think that's related to now is, like, we have all these parents staying home, experiencing sort of what it's like to be disadvantaged as a person at work, potentially having to choose between your career and your family at times. And that's something that working parents think about when they add to their family. But it's not something that very many people have recognized as a really big need, a need of reform inside of our workplace. And yeah, that just came to mind as a really great example.
And if I could just bring us around and then bring it to the Black Lives Matter, I'm fortunate to have a great partner who helps me out with discussing these racial injustices every week. And so we make the time together. We decided together to do this, and I'm so fortunate. She's another person of color. While she's not a Black woman, she is a woman, and she feels very strongly about this. And we both know that there is going to be significant effort needed to make these changes. So I am grateful for that. I think that having an ally, especially with a cause like that, really makes the difference in how successful something can be or someone can be. And for me, that's what I'm finding with this. I think there's strength in numbers, and I'm really grateful to have her as my ally and that she's committed to this cause with me. So, you know, we talked about it from the workplace, from the pandemic, and I just wanted to kind of bring us back around also to the racial injustices. So I think together we made a trio of hitting all bases.
You definitely touched each current event. So, what are some actions that you've seen or have taken to be an ally, or what are some actions that can change over the years?
I think one thing for me that stands out is just in at work especially is remembering for us to celebrate all the diversity and inclusion months, right? So while I'm not a member of the LGBT community, because there's been so much happening with COVID-19 and we've all transitioned to work from home, it's just being that voice in the room that says like, hey guys, like what are we doing for this month? Like let's make sure we don't let June end and we haven't done something at the department level, right? We might be doing something at a larger company level, but our teams in our area are used to us doing something for every D&I month within our department. And so I think it's just being that voice, like not waiting for someone from the LGBT community to have to speak up and come to us and say, hey, D&I committee, you haven't done anything this month. I think you can just recognize that your committee or you as a team member haven't done anything and ask how we could celebrate it remotely, right? So just being open to new ideas as well, I think helps that as well. Just being in your allyship, coming to the table with, hey, here's a creative something we haven't done yet virtually that we could do while all of our teams are working from home.
Yeah, I love being proactive and open to new ideas. That's what I heard from you. That's great. Is there anything else that Tiffany or Sarah you'd like to add?
I actually just talked to someone yesterday and they were talking about their church membership and how it's pretty homogenous and they're wanting to be an ally, they're wanting to educate themselves, they're wanting to help others. And so they came to me with a question on how can I do this? So we talked about some resources and I shared, some of my stories and said that I was willing to help. But I think it's very important that this person is going to do that work and that they are being an ally. And I think that's important to know that it can happen in any space. It could be your personal space, your workspace, your membership, such as this person with their churches. And I love that we talked about the diversity within that and what that can look like. It can be anyone and any purpose, really. So that openness is so important when you think about allies, mentors, and sponsors.
For me, allyship is about being open to the opportunity and taking what is right in front of you and helping clear blockers. I think a way that I've been able to show up for my colleagues at the Zebras. I mentioned I helped start the SHRM-CP, but what's been more important to me as the SHRM-CP has gotten off the ground is helping folks around my community create more employee resource groups inside the Zebra because, women, we are a group in tech that has special things that we should be paying attention to, specific needs, specific professional development opportunities that we want to be able to provide. But there are many underrepresented groups in tech, and what's an opportunity that came up for me was just helping get those groups off the ground, because the more we have, the more support that there is for people on the ground, especially inside of our companies, the better.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very important topic. So with that in mind, I know that you're talking about ERGs and stuff like that. Let's move on to mentorship. Can you tell us about your experience growing a relationship with a mentor? Maybe how did you identify an approach to grow the relationship? And was your mentor solely for your career, or did they support you personally as well? Sarah, I'm going to actually point at you since you were just getting really deep into the ERGs.
I've had many mentors over the course of my career, and I think having them for different purposes is important. And I really think of my career as a game and strategy. I need to know where I'm going and know what I need to get there. And sometimes I don't know what I need to get there, and I really lean on my mentors to help me figure that out. The mentor who's most important in my life right now, we actually met at my first job. And she was a mentor to me there too. She was teaching me technical skills, how to code in SQL, so that I could become a better researcher. And, we kind of lost touch over the years, and she ended up starting a career coaching company. We reconnected, and now we have a very professional mentorship, and it's both for me. It's personal and professional. She's helped guiding me in my career, helping me figure out new ways to tackle problems that I'm experiencing in my life, in my career, helping me see new doors that I can open, and finding her, re-engaging with her kind of at different points in my career. It's really taught me the value of knowing what you need and seeking out the people who can best support you in that moment that you're in. It's not one person, and we'll probably get to this, but finding, and Summer, you mentioned at the very beginning, it's important to identify mentors who have the time, and knowing that time commitment may need to change, and you may need to sunset that relationship and kind of move on. That's a very natural part of having mentors over the course of your career. And, you know, Erin and I have already had a sunset period, and now we're coming back up to another time where she's really supporting me in many aspects of my life right now. And it's a relationship that I, you know, could not go without at this point in time.
Great. Summer, how have you identified or approached to grow a mentor relationship?
Yeah, so some of the ways that I've identified a mentor relationship, this advice I actually got from somebody else and it's just stuck with me, is really going into the mentorship relationship with an ask. And by that, I mean going in with, what's my greatest opportunity that I'm looking to get mentorship on? What are my strengths that I bring to whatever it is I'm trying to work on or my next career goal? And how do I feel that that person could help me, right? So instead of just going into it like, hey, I'm looking for a mentor, my conversation would be with somebody was more like, hey, I'm looking for a mentor. I actually haven't done contracting in our company and I'm looking to grow my contracting experience. And I heard from, you know, Susan, you were amazing with contracts and you have a lot of knowledge, and wondering if in this season you have the capacity to be a mentor, you know, twice a month. And so just laying all the cards on the table, sometimes you'll go to that person and they'll say, no, Summer, like, I appreciate it. Yes, you know, I do have a lot of experience with contracting at our company, but in this season it won't work. But hey, what about Sam? Like, Sam introduced to him, and let's see if he has the capacity. So I think it's also just being open to who your mentor is going to be, right? Like yes, I would have loved if it would have been the first person I talked to, but understanding that if they don't have the time to invest in it, I would rather them tell me no up front than me to be feeling like I'm chasing them down for our mentoring sessions that I keep getting reshuffled. I mean, be open to, you're going to get reshuffled some, right? Especially if you have like an executive or senior executive as someone who's mentoring you, you're going to get some reshuffling, but it's just like, I don't want to be reshuffled every single time we're trying to meet, right? Then at that point, I feel like, this may not be the right season for that person to be mentoring me. So yeah, I think it's that. And then I think it's also just being open to where you really can grow. I think it takes a little bit of vulnerability on the mentee side, right? I have to be willing to come to the table and say, hey, I'm not really great at X, but I want to get better at it, right? And so you come to the table with something you're going to work on versus coming to the table with, I'm just looking to get promoted. That doesn't really give your mentor or potential mentor a lot to work with when you can boil it down to something more manageable, tangible that they could actually pour into you for a season, right? And being open to, like what Sarah said, some of these mentor or mentee relationships may not last forever. A lot of times I like to ask for someone to mentor me for a quarter, right? So I start off with like, is this something in this next quarter that you can commit to, versus asking for like, hey, over the next year, right? That may be unrealistic for someone to commit for a whole year, not knowing what the year may look like.
And also too, to specify into that as well. I know that when you mentioned a mentor and you were specific on who it might be, you said senior executive. So I just want to follow up with a question. Does a mentor always have to be somebody who is high up on the top? How would you define what a mentor looks like? Could it be somebody peer-to-peer? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I personally would say no, it doesn't always have to be someone in executive leadership. Really look for your mentors depending on what you need in that season, right? So if I need more contracting experience, it doesn't need to be the senior vice president over contracting at our company that's my mentor. It could be the person who just has a lot of experience and knows the contracting process in and out. So in my case, I need to pinpoint what is it about contracting that I'm trying to learn, and then be able to express that in a meeting, right? Say, okay, well, I don't know the process backwards and forward yet, and I'm looking for someone who knows the process. And for me, I feel like it could be anybody. He could be like, hey, it's my manager, Jim. Jim knows the process somewhere backward and forward. It doesn't have to be an executive leader by any means.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I have one of my greatest mentors who has stuck with me was my former manager, and we became friends out of that relationship. And to your question earlier, Melanie, she is on the personal side and the professional side. And I feel like that really rounds it out, because sometimes when, you know, Summer, you brought up vulnerability, we need to be honest and bring our whole selves into the relationship. And it's back to what Sarah said too about give and take. So where we are in our career could look differently. So I have that person as a mentor. I've had multiple mentors. I still have multiple mentors. So it could be a peer. It could be someone in my LinkedIn network who has a strength that I don't have. So it's pulling from all of that. And that's how you kind of know when you've arrived at this mentoring thing. It's learning what you need from the relationship, that give and take, being honest with yourself and owning it, not just expecting your mentor to bring you along the way, because how can they help you if you don't bring something to the table?
Absolutely. Okay, so when we bringing what we bring to the table, let's move on to sponsorship. What are some of the important truths about sponsorships? And I'm going to open this up to roundtable.
So sponsorship, I'll start with a couple of things that comes to mind for me, is that the easiest thing is to really think about the sponsor relationship is different than the mentor relationship. And the fact that the sponsor is really trying to spend their relationship currency, right? So you've got to think of it more of like, this is a person that has a seat at the table, really is in rooms that you're not in, whether it be virtually or in person at the moment, but they're really able to bring your name into the room before your feet actually arrive to that room. And so really think of it as someone who's going to help you, but they're helping you in a different sense. I always like to tell folks, like, you really need to spoon feed, as I like to say, your sponsor where you're trying to go next. And your sponsor needs to know one of your great success stories that's recently occurred, right? So when they bring your name up in the room, I wouldn't want them just to say Summer, and then it's like, I don't know what she's worked on, but I know she'd like to go to X next, right? Your sponsor really has to be able to almost have that like elevator pitch, your elevator pitch down with your key highlights. And so I think that's where you really have to make it a point to continuously update your sponsor, right? Like if you're looking to do something new, does your sponsor know that, right? If you're looking to grow in your career, could your sponsor answer like where you're trying to go next, right? And then could they even give your top 2 highlights? I think that's something to ask. And then I think also with sponsorship is you really do need to make that ask, right? So don't assume like, oh, I just assume so-and-so is my sponsor. You really want to have a conversation with them and ask them and explain to them why you're seeking sponsorship. Like it's something as simple as like, hey, I'm looking to get promoted in the next 8 months, and I would love to have you as my sponsor because of blank reason. So I think those are a couple of key things, is really understanding like why you're looking for a sponsor, and then understanding that you do need to keep in touch with your sponsor so that they know what your successes are.
I completely agree with that, Summer. To me, of the 3 relationships, sponsorship is it's the most important one to be explicit and very defined, because you're typically tapping somebody who has a seat at the table, as you mentioned, Summer, typically somebody who's in an executive position. When I was getting the SHRM off the ground, I started meeting with our CEO. I really wanted him to be the sponsor of our group. I also thought that might be the easiest way for our group to get money. And the way we approached that sponsor relationship is I tried to understand what he felt like he needed from me and from our group to feel confident, entrusting us with a few $1,000s to build volunteer and professional development opportunities for the women at the Zebra. And what that ended up turning into is a very defined process for how we build our budget requests. We had he really wanted to make sure that the asks we were making were grounded in what the women at the company actually needed. So we ran surveys and workshops once a quarter to make sure that he had a proving ground for understanding that we are going through a process. We're listening to what the employees need. We're not asking for money for just happy hours, for example. But he's also somebody who doesn't have a ton of time to dive into all of our documentation. So we ended up building a really clean template for our budget proposals. And as we got going, started building in a feedback loop. Hey, Keith, you gave us, X amount of money last quarter. This is exactly what we spent it on. We have the receipts, making sure that he knew that we were both good stewards and that we were continuing to provide programming that was actually needed for the employees that our group was serving. And creating that very defined relationship, making sure that it met his needs, and we were cognizant of the fact that he has a lot of things to do and we need to make it easy for him to say yes, has made our group and that relationship very successful.
When coming to an executive, for example, with your example you just gave, Sarah, do you think that you need to clearly define or potentially have a conversation with the sponsor to know what he specifically needs as well, versus just coming with your needs?
Yes. Yeah. That was actually my first conversation with him. It was not about, and I didn't even really know the needs of the group at that time. I came to him saying, I thought that this was an opportunity for us. And I really wanted to know what he thought about that and what he was going to need to make it an easy yes. And once I got that information from him, I was like, cool, I need to run a workshop and I need to come back to him with some suggestions, some thought out, how much that was going to cost, basically a budget proposal. And we would go from there. And to this day, he's never said no to anything that we've put in front of him because of that process. And so thankful for that.
That's good. That's awesome. You've been successful. Does sponsorship have to be formal? I know we're saying clearly defined and all that. I just want to ask that question.
I think it has to be. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, please, Tiffany.
I was gonna say, I don't think it has to be formal, but I think as Sarah highlighted, a lot of, or through her example, you can tell that the stakes are a bit higher with that. So while it doesn't necessarily have to be formal and you might not have a formal process, I do think you have to put in the work to figure out what it is that you need and how they can best position you so that since they have the seat at the table, even if you could have a peer who could be your sponsor, they could be at your same level, but because of their influence or other types of authority, they may be the person who is the best person to sponsor you. So I don't think it has to be formal necessarily, because it's going to change based on who you are, who that person is, and where you are in your career or on the journey.
Okay, so during these times that we're dealing with now, COVID specifically, quarantine, everybody working from home, etc., what are some virtual ways that you would suggest that you could network with your sponsor, ally, or mentor? How could you grow those relationships now while we're all at home?
I think that's a great question, Melanie. I think there's a lot of good ways you can continue to grow those relationships. I think especially now that we're all work from home is, for me, especially as someone who during the weekday I'm really ran by Outlook, or Outlook, I run Outlook. I'm not sure if I run Outlook. I think Outlook runs me, but I would say definitely pre-planning. And so what I try to do is I sit down and look at my month ahead of time. So like as we're getting kind of to the end of July, looking at August. And what I do is I intentionally reserve time on my calendar for coffee chats that I don't actually have scheduled with somebody. So in other words, I may know like the second Wednesday of every month and the fourth Wednesday of every month, I have 10 o'clock to 10:30 reserved. And then I later will plug in the person. So I think part of it sometimes is just holding space on your own calendar and realizing like, okay, who have I not talked to in my network, informal mentor, or maybe someone who's mentored me in the past? And what if I proactively just reached out with, hey, here's 3 times I'm available in August. Would you like to do a virtual coffee chat? And I'll tell you, most of the time when you give people 3 options to meet with you, one of them will work or they'll come back with a different option, right? Also, I think it's knowing what's happening in your leadership group. I can just speak for our team. In our area, lunchtime has become sacred. And so I would know, this is again just for our area, but I know personally, I wouldn't send my mentor my sponsor, a note to meet between 12 and 1. Our whole team takes lunch between 12 and 1, and we've actually gotten feedback that folks are really feeling like that's the one time they need to be able to be away. And so I think it's also realizing those things that have happened now that we're working from home. If you're in an area where everybody's really asked to try to take their lunch and be able to like check on their kids or run with their dog in their backyard, realize if you send an invite to have coffee at 12 in our department, you're likely to get it declined, right? And so just setting yourself up for success, kind of understanding what are the things that are happening, and knowing like, okay, let me try to work around that and be proactive. I think that's the biggest thing I would say is definitely be proactive. You asking for, a virtual coffee chat for tomorrow is less likely to happen versus me asking for a virtual coffee chat, the last Friday in August. I mean, me asking now for August is more likely to happen as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I know, like with me, for example, I have kid at home. I'm definitely well into a lot of the projects and stuff like that. Do you feel, and sometimes I can feel afraid to reach out. What is your perception or advice on people for others who have a lot of time and are spending a lot of time dealing with kids, dealing with that, and but still want to reach out and network?
I think you just make the time. I think you have to make the time. It's back to what we talked about in the beginning, right? It has to be intentional. I have a mentee in Italy. That's really fun. So, and had he not reached out, I would not have known that he was kind of in the background and needing things. And one of the things that I think is very important is realizing it can be intimidating to ask someone for the help, especially if you're not a person who's wired to ask for help. But think of the reward that you'll get from that. And as with most things, unless we ask, we don't know what the outcome could be. So if you're willing to ask and you need something, that's the only way to find out. The worst somebody could say is, not right now, or I just really can't do that, or maybe it's not within my sphere of influence or control. But I think that asking and taking that step is so important. So people love to be able to help, and they want to help celebrate you and your successes. So I would say just go out there and fearlessly ask.
Especially right now, it's an exercise in self-discipline and self-advocacy, because like we are home. In some cases, you know, you're taking 10 steps between your bed and where you're working all day, and it can be hard. Those boundary lines are getting blurred pretty significantly right now. So you have to be disciplined enough to block the time and commit to it. But also if you're somebody who's shy about asking or worried about getting a no, think of it as an exercise in self-advocacy. It's just practice for the next time you need to advocate for yourself.
I think you make a good point too on that, because of the fact that like just making the time even for your own advocacy, it could even be something as simple as like blocking your calendar, say 2 days a week for spending 20 minutes on LinkedIn, and just being intentional even with the 20 minutes you're on, right? It's like, okay, if you're trying to grow your network, or you're trying to, maybe potentially you're in a season where you are looking for a mentor, maybe you decide to actually write more posts if you're someone who doesn't normally post on LinkedIn during that season. And that could be a way you do obtain a mentor even outside of your company, right? Or you're trying to diversify your network, right? So just, I think making that time will really make a difference, and you can do a lot in a short amount of time too. So I think that's another good point, is like, it doesn't have to be a long amount of time for those of you that are like juggling kids and homeschooling. That'll start up again soon for some of the areas. It could be short amount of times, but I just think be intentional with what you're doing to help build your network.
Definitely, that's great. Okay, so we're at 4:38 or 3:38 Central Time. Sorry,
It is 4:38 here.
Should we open it up for Q&A, or should we touch on any other topics, or you have any? Did I miss anything? Where should we go from here?
I just want to share one final thing on mentorship that I always like to close or share with folks as I'm closing out on mentorship, is be really open to that mentor that you may start off with a little bit of a rough relationship could be like the biggest blessing for you. And I just share that because I had a mentor once who told me something that I kind of took to heart at that moment, but it's been like the best thing that's been said to me. I'm an introvert at heart, and that mentor told me, Summer, you got to stop letting people meet you for the first time at the interview table. And when he said it, it was kind of like cut like a knife, because I had just been declined for promotion. And so I was thinking, coming to him as a mentor, he was going to be like, oh, like, let me give you like a virtual hug. And he was like, no, you need to get out there more. You need to be more visible. People need to know who you are. They need to know what you can do. And at that moment, it really was like, whoa, like, it really did hit home like really hard for me. It was like one of those hard truths. But I'll tell you now that I hear his voice. And anytime I get ready to apply for a position, I always ask myself, how much have I done in networking in that department? How well have I been preparing myself, and not waiting till, okay, now they have a posting, I'm finally going to go venture over to that team or that area. So just be open to that. I think of him often. I will be honest and say he's not my most fondest mentor, but I will say he was one of the most impactful people because he said a really hard truth that I needed to hear.
I love that. And I think too, just like being open, you have to be open to feedback. And I love that you shared that perspective, Summer, because sometimes we go into things with false hope, or we've already got the outcome figured out before we get to that situation. And I think it's very important. I've had some of those situations too, where it's like, ooh, that is not how I thought that was about to go, or what you were going to say. I thought you were going to be, you know, all, oh, where's my hug? And it was a hard truth. But those are how we grow. I've learned some of my greatest lessons that way. So just be open, and constructive feedback is our friend.
Summer, I've had a very similar experience getting sort of slapped in the face with the hard truth, and the mentor who gave me that hard truth also armed me with the knowledge that the way I reacted to that hard truth was also information that I could leverage to improve myself, my career, my skill sets, the way I receive and take feedback. And that piece, and stepping outside of my own reaction and looking at it, was one of the most impactful insights I've ever had. I'm like, yeah, the best mentors are the people who can look at your situation as a third party and just tell you what you need to hear sometimes.
I love that. Yeah, different perspectives in your network, definitely diversifying who you get advice from. I think that's great advice. Okay, so I guess we'll go to Q&A. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that. Hold on one second. Okay, so I have a question here. Hello, everyone. I have a question that, what should we do to solve conflicts between these relationships? Especially in a current situation where we cannot meet at the office. So let's say there's a conflict between your mentor, ally, or sponsor, and how would you resolve it virtually?
Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, thanks. I actually experienced this like just a few months ago with my current mentor, Erin, and it was really challenging because there was a gap in between us chatting, and like this thing was like festering, and I felt like I didn't have the opportunity to talk with her about it. And I wouldn't do this again, but what I did is I leaned back on where I'm most comfortable, which is that I feel personally I'm a stronger written communicator than I am in person, especially one-on-one if I'm nervous about the topic. So I wrote my thoughts down, made a huge long note doc, and I was like, okay, this is exactly how I want to approach that conversation. And then when we did get to talk, which was like the next day, so I was like doing a bunch of prep for this meeting, I found that like having, speaking to and addressing the situation with my own style, knowing that like I do feel more comfortable when I can come into a harder conversation with something written down or my thoughts written down so that I don't forget, that made that conversation one of the most honest and open that we've had. And it felt like I could kind of just like shed a lot of the expectations that I had because I knew that what I needed to say walking into it. But yeah, it's hard having hard conversations virtually when you can't be, IRL face to face.
I definitely would echo that, Sarah. It is hard to have these virtual conversations, especially when conflict comes up. This is not a summer original, but I will tell you something that I pretty regularly follow. So I got to make that disclosure. I didn't make this up, guys. But there's an organization called Partners in Leadership, and I don't work for them. This is just a plug because I love what they share and what they do. There's some great seminars that they're doing on Tuesdays during lunchtime, and I've attended several of them while we've been working from home. And one of the segments was really about like this conflict resolution, like how do you work on this? And one of the examples that they use a lot in Partners in Leaderships is the stories I'm telling myself about X. So say I was having a conflict with my mentor and I didn't like the way my mentor, maybe, I don't know, something was happening, right? I could go to my mentor and say, hey, the story I'm telling myself about what happened in this meeting is that you really don't support my growth in this area, right? And so then again, I'm also making it about myself. Like it's the story I'm telling myself about the situation. It also makes the person not be so much on the defense. Like I'm not coming to you and saying, you didn't support me. I'm saying the way that it happen, this is the story I'm telling myself about it. And it gives that person an opportunity to express like, yeah, you're dead on, Summer. I don't support you in doing this because I feel you still need to grow. Or the person could say, you know, Summer, it's not that I don't support you in that area. It's just at that moment, I don't feel like that was a project for you to try to go for based on some other goals you have. Right. And right there, I got clarity versus me festering with, I don't think you support me now. So that's just one tactic as far as I have actually used and found it to be helpful.
That's great. Okay. How would you invite someone to be your mentor if you have not spoken to them? And in this virtual environment, how would you just reach out and pitch? Can you be my mentor?
LinkedIn is a great way.
Go ahead, Tiffany.
I think it like, yeah, I would just say LinkedIn. You can send a nice little note, and one of the things that's important is not making it all about you. I think we've talked about that already, but to say how you see that person helping you. Hey, I really loved your profile. I really like how you talk about collaboration and project management in your profile. That's a skill that I could benefit from. I really think I could learn a lot from you. Would you be open to a conversation or a coffee chat? I'd love to have coffee with people. So I think that that's one good way that you could do that, and just be authentic in yourself. You don't have to be someone that you're not, but just make the ask.
I love what you said about making the ask. I think that's one of the real important things, Tiffany, is like when you do have these virtual coffee chats with folks, is like if your goal is to possibly get a mentor out of that coffee chat, I think you do need to be very direct and ask that question, right? You may have a great coffee and the person's like, okay, this was great, good catching up, enjoyed talking to you. And like they're hanging up and you're just like, oh, well, am I their mentee or not? Like, so just being a little more direct, I think is very helpful. I personally also always like to come to the table with one area I'm looking to grow in. So coming to the table with one thing I'm looking to grow in, and then that way that person can say yay or nay. Like, yes, I'm a great person to support you with growing in data and analytics, or the person could say, Summer, I'm not the person really that would be best to mentor you if you're looking to grow your data and analytics skills, but here's somebody else, right? And then if the person says no, I think it's also important to ask at the end of that conversation, is there somebody else they would recommend based on what you shared on what your goal is, right? A lot of times if they say no, they may know somebody. You just have to be willing to ask them, like, okay, I understand it's not you in this season. Do you have someone else you would recommend based on where I'm looking to go or where I'm looking to grow next? And just by asking that, sometimes you get some amazing recommendations. I mean, they know people that you don't even know. And you're like, wow, I didn't even know this person does this. So I think just being open to asking.
No, that's great. Okay. When it comes to allyship, in the past, has it changed? Has the way allyship looked in the past and the way allyship looks now and the way allyship will look in the future, do you think any of those have changed?
I'm going to say yes.
Go ahead, Summer.
Oh, I was just going to say, my gut reaction is yes, it's changed. I think that a lot of times allyship, especially before the Black Lives Matter movement became so predominant, and before the George Floyd case, I think a lot of times folks felt like allyship was just one of those things where, you know, I just support you kind of just with that general statement. I think now in this season, what we're looking for from allies is more of, I'm actually going to stand with you and stand for you, right? And so standing with us is one of those things where I think of, and just this is my personal opinion, but I feel it's more of like when someone actually, you know, comes to a conversation that maybe is talking, for example, in my case, it'd be like about the African-American community and about the issues that we're facing right now, right? And an ally coming to a forum like that because they're looking to learn or they're looking to engage. And then speaking for us is when you think about, there is just really honestly and truthfully, there are areas and forums that depending on who you are and what your cultural background, ethnicity is you're going to have better privilege in some of those forums to speak up. right? So being aware of like, you really do have a little bit more grace in that forum to really say something if you see something not happening for a different group of people, and being the person that's going to be the voice. So I definitely feel in this season it's a much more active allyship that is happening versus being just a passive, I support, you know, everybody, or I support lots of different groups that are not my own group. I think that in this season we're looking for activation, and activation happens by actions, right? So it's not just the letters, it's not just the emails, it's being more active.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. How I've seen that change in myself, but also the allies that the employee resource groups at the Zebra have been trying to pull in. I think before Black Lives Matter, allyship felt like a thing that we had to invite people to. And now it feels like people are like doing the work themselves. They're educating themselves. They're being proactive about how they can step in. They're asking for opportunities to do so inside of our employee resource groups. And that's something that I've taken seriously in myself as an ally. Like, it's no longer somebody else's responsibility to show me where I can be an ally. Where I can actually be a great ally is by standing next to the folks in my community who need that support, to my Black colleagues and my Black friends, and being with them in those moments and taking action, and being proactive in those moments when, as you said, Summer, when I might have the privilege in that situation and be able to speak up.
So powerful. I think too, when we talk about the future, that I see a correlation between allyship. Now we're saying they're different as we define them. They absolutely are, but I hope, and what I envision for the future is that allyship and sponsorship almost become one, at least as it relates to the racial injustices that are happening, that people move from even a spot of allyship and become a sponsor to do the right thing. So that's kind of my take on that question too.
Great, that's great. So with allyship, I know a lot of the current events are, you know, people are asking, how can we support? How can we support? Is there something additional that an allyship relationship can do that's not just only support?
I mean, yes, for sure. I'm thinking through, I don't know, Summer or Tiffany, if you have like very explicit asks, thinking through like what we've tried at the Zebra or what I've tried myself.
Yeah, I think part of it is also, like you said, support is great. I think it's also, like you said, just trying to better understand what's happening directly, whether it be in your team, in your department, in your community, and just understanding that that can be different for everyone, right? So I always like to remind folks, like, I speak as Summer. I am not speaking for the entire Black population of Austin, Texas, right? Like, I can't do that. There's different people that feel different ways, even within my same community that I identify myself with. So I think it's also being aware that, just like with anything else in life, is people have different needs and different asks, right? So it could be volunteering, right? Maybe even just diversifying how you volunteer. If you've always volunteered, for example, at the food bank, maybe in this season you consider this quarter finding an activity that supports the different organizations that are doing things in support and response of the racial injustice, right? It could be something like that. Like your next team builder, if you're on a team that you normally do volunteering, maybe it's finding something virtual, if you're working from home, that you could do as a team that really does support one of those causes, or even as a team attending something, right? The NAACP, the Urban League, there's lots of organizations that have a chapter in most cities. It's maybe finding out when they're doing their next event. And if it's virtually and it's something your team could attend, maybe you suggest that. I mean, that's how you as an ally can show up. You don't have to wait for the person on your team that might be part of the NAACP to suggest the team support this next event. You could yourself go out there and look on Instagram or Facebook for your local NAACP, local Urban League, local other organizations, and just bring it forward, right? Say, hey, they're having something next Thursday. What if we as a team decide we'd all dial in? That's how allyship could show up in different ways.
And how about allyship within an organization? I know that we've been speaking a lot about reaching out to the networks outside. What about within your organization?
I mean, the problem of systemic racial injustice is that it is literally everywhere. And once, like, that was kind of a hard concept for me to wrap my mind around, like, is it everywhere? And when I started to realize that, like, yes, it is, I started to think about, well, what do I get paid to do every day? I'm a researcher. I talk to people for a living. My team talks to people for a living. And we're responsible for theming those insights and bringing them upwards so that we can make better decisions for our stakeholders, can make better decisions on behalf of our consumers. And I started to think, well, if the problem is really everywhere, then that means, like, my research team and the way we do research has probably been part of these systemic racial injustices. And so we started looking at, well, like, if this is everywhere, let's start with, like, how we're making money and how we can be more ethical in that way. How can we change our research processes? How can we include more voices of color? And those conversations have been some of the most, like, rewarding of my career, and the changes that we've made, I'm really proud of. But yeah, I think it starts with, like, what do you do every day for a living, and how is that contributing to the way that our society operates today? And can you make changes in how you're working, or what your team delivers, to make a small change in that? I found that that's been kind of like one tangible way that we've been able to impact it. And now every study that we do is, like, white people are a minority, blanket across the board, no exceptions, and I love it.
I think also in your own, within your own organization, you can also be asking, if you're a part of an interview panel and you notice you're getting just one particular type of candidate, is going back to your talent recruiters or HR and asking, are there other candidates for this role? Are there other candidates that from different backgrounds, from different genders, different, just everything, just different, that if you're seeing the same type of candidate. So that's a way you could start with if you're there. And then it could also be something as simple as, if you see someone getting ignored in a meeting, or someone trying to speak up in a forum, and people are passing them over, maybe being that voice in that meeting that says, hey, so-and-so, actually, I saw, she was trying to make a point, or it seems like she had something to share. Just bringing that to the forefront of those meetings and forums that you're in every day for work could be helpful as well.
No, that's great. How about if you are looking for a mentor within your organization? How would you identify your mentor? Does it have to be somebody on your team, or can it be somebody outside of your team?
It could be both, depending on where you're looking to go in your career or what your goals are. It could be your direct manager. I think Summer said that earlier. Maybe it was Sarah, but it could be your direct manager. I shared an example earlier too, where my direct manager was my mentor, but I had in the past too, where someone who worked in HR before I worked in HR helped me craft my resume, and she said, you're very much underselling your skills. No one cares that you filed the papers. And I was like, but they do. That's why it's on my job description. So sometimes you need someone with an outside perspective. Their work may be close to yours and closely tied, and it may be outside of that. Sometimes you need that diverse perspective. So you need it to be someone who's not maybe within your team, who can help you and to share and shed some light on a different way to think about things.
No, that's great. So I think we've answered all the Q&A questions. Thank you so much for this very valuable conversation. I really think that, especially in tech, this is something that's always coming up. I'm going to bring it back to Liz. Hi, Liz.
Hey, yeah, thank you so much again for moderating, and I loved all the advice. I definitely love the making the ask point. I feel like sometimes I do get caught up in, bonding with the other person so much that I walk away and I'm like, oh, right. What was the ask? And I'll walk away. So I'll definitely need to put that in mind. Yeah, love to just give a little round of applause to each other as we're wrapping up. I know that that's what I miss a lot from the in-person events. But again, everyone, thank you so much for logging on. I know that y'all all have really busy days filled with meetings. So thanks for listening to us. We do have an event coming up March the 5th. It's going to be a coaching session on personal pitches. So I feel like you can craft your pitch to go find your new mentor or your new sponsor and get all ready for that. So I'm going to drop a link so y'all can get registered for that. And unless any of the panelists just have any final words that they'd like to say, we'll have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. Well, bye, everyone. You'll have a great one.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.